Our students' ignorance is not a failing of the educational system. It is a crowning achievement. Efforts by several generations of philosophers and reformers have combined to produce a generation of know nothings. Patrick Deneen, American political theorist and author. All right. Good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion, politics, and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time. All right. So, initially, I had planned on doing kind of like a double header tonight, and my intention, if you saw the episode this morning, got a new chatter in the show, and they were like, "Hey, I'm looking forward to the show tonight." And my intention had initially been, I'm going to do a Rumble Premium because I have to do some of those. And then I was like, well, I'm going to add in something. I mean, since somebody, I'm growing. Since somebody put out there like, "Hey, I'm looking forward to your show." I was like, well, crap. I don't want you to look forward to a show that you can't watch, so I'll do something for you. Then I found out I have a meeting, an early morning meeting for work tomorrow. So then I had to kind of like figure out, okay, how do I do all of this stuff? How do I arrange accordingly? So what I decided to do initially, my intention was to review this recent Jubilee debate that, well, I don't know if you want to call it debate, but I guess you can. They do this surrounded where they have like one person that's on one side of an issue and then they're surrounded by 20 people that are on the other side of the issue. And then they have a timer and people will, at certain intervals, people will basically play a musical chair type approach to get to the chair and then argue. And then the person who's in the middle, they usually have like, I think, four different assertions that they state. They're like, here's my claim number one, this and this and this and this. And so then what ends up happening is, people will come up and they'll debate them. Usually the person that's in the center is pretty knowledgeable. There's somebody that's probably been doing this for a while. And then the people that are surrounding them, they're people that, haven't built a name yet. And perhaps they're not as established in their skills yet. They're younger, so on and so forth. Right. But it can be interesting to watch. And there have been, I actually reviewed a Jubilee like a couple months ago, and it got me in trouble with YouTube because YouTube was like, "Oh, I see you're using somebody else's content." No, and I was like, and so they pulled my stream. So then what I started doing was, I was like, all right, maybe I need to start obscuring the video, and I don't know. Tonight, I'm not going to obscure the video. So if you're watching on YouTube and something happens to the stream, well, then I apologize. I'll reach out to YouTube and get them to correct it. They corrected it in the past. We'll see. We're gonna gamble tonight. We're gonna see how it plays out. So this show was an hour and 40 minutes. And the way it works is you have four claims that are by the person who's in the center. And then the last 10 minutes. And so each claim gets 20 minutes, I think. Was that 20, 40, 60, 80, 10, 90? Yeah, hour and a half. Yeah, that's about right. So each claim, I believe, gets 20 minutes. And so then somebody rushes, they sit down, and then the clock starts, and then they can have their debate. And when enough flags are raised, the rest of the circle, they have red flags. And when they raise the flag, when enough of them raise, that means the person gets voted out. Okay. And then the next person comes up. The timer stops or it pauses. And then the next person comes up and then they continue the timer. Okay. And then after 20 minutes, they move on to the next claim. And then after all four claims have been addressed and worked out, argued, whatever, then the person in the center, they will go ahead and they'll say, all right, I want to debate this person on a claim of their choosing. So that's how it works. It's pretty interesting format. It's kind of rough in a sense because again, you've got somebody that's more seasoned and they're debating people that may not be seasoned at this, right? They may not be good at it. Maybe they don't know all the facts, because maybe it's not their job. They've got a regular everyday job and they just happen to, however the selection process goes, they were able to make it on the show. Whereas usually the person that comes in, like politics and debate and, giving their opinion tends to be their job, at least from what I've seen. And so they tend to be a little bit more polished, a little bit more skilled, they have more knowledge because literally that's what they do. But it's kind of interesting because, it's like, hey, you're knowledgeable. There's 20 people that may not be as knowledgeable. Let's see how you do. And so it's kind of interesting. And I don't watch all of them because I'm just far too busy. But this one caught my attention because one of the guys that was on there allegedly was fired. So I was like, whoa, he got fired for his opinions? Yeah, now if you know me, I'm a free speech absolutist. Okay. So I don't I oppose mobs coming after people. I find, if I'm at work and a mob doesn't like something that I've said online, and then they all reach out to my HR office and they're like, oh, that DL, he said some terrible things. You need to let him go. And then they do let me go. I would consider that to be cancel culture. But if it's just like it just so happened to be popular and maybe some employees saw it and they raised the attention, to management, and management brought me in the office and they determined, you know what, we're just going to go on our way. We're going to part ways. Then I would just say that's freedom of association. Okay. So and we'll talk more about that after the intermission. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play some of the clips and I'm just going to give some of my thoughts on the clips, the dynamic, maybe even some of the commentary. And then after intermission, we're going to play this Connor guy. We're going to play his in full. So I'm not playing everybody else's in full. I'm just playing clips. And we're going to walk through some of the things that he had to say. And let me tell you, when I was watching this, my mind was like, okay, because we're in trouble if this is in any way representative of our young people. I'm not going to lie. I'm not pulling punches. Okay. You guys were bad, especially bad. And I'm saying bad, even considering that when you're young, like when I was 20, if you had brought me on one of those shows, I would have done horrible compared to how I would do today. Part of it is I'm more educated, I'm more well read, just because I'm 47. Like if you brought me in for 20 years ago, right? I've had 20 more years to learn stuff. I've also had 20 more years to sharpen my chops, if you will, and come up with better arguments and understand how to engage. So, even when you consider that, I'm just like, wow, this was amazing. So let's start playing some clips here and we'll get into this because it was intense. So here's this first one.
Newsflash, the conservatives are liberal to me, okay? Neocons, libertarians, all those mainstream people, there might as well be leftists to me, okay? That's how far to the right I am.
Wow. So he finishes just as how far to the right I am. Like, wow. He's so far right that he said libertarians, of which I am, are leftist to him. I'm like, what? Now I listened to his arguments, and I'm not going to play all of them. He had some particularly bad ones. Like he claimed to be Native American, and the rationale behind it, because Mehdi Hasan, who's the guy in the center. Apologies, I didn't get to that part. I didn't mention that earlier. But Mehdi Hasan is the one that's the man in the middle, if you will, and the guy that you're looking at on the screen. He is one of the 20, and you can see he's pretty white. Okay, now I don't necessarily look and say, "Oh, you're looking pasty white. You must not be Native American of any kind." I just am like, well, visibly, I'm not seeing it, but whatever. But what was really striking later when he was claiming to be Native American was he said, my family goes back to like the 15th century. And he's like, so I've got a stake in this land. I'm Native. And Mehdi Hasan was like, well, who are the people before the 1500s? And the guy didn't really seem to want to answer, and And it was just wild because I'm like, dude, you're claiming that you're Native American because you've determined a fixed point in time, a special point in time for which you can trace your family roots back. But that's not really. He did say like, oh, people before that were indigenous, but he kind of brushed it off as if like, oh yeah, well the indigenous people aren't Native American. I'm like, so he's saying libertarians are leftist to him, conservatives are leftist to him, and then he also claimed to be Native American. And I don't get all bent out like I'm Native American, I'm like 20%. And I don't get bent out of shape when people claim to be something. I usually just kind of poke fun and laugh at them. Like Elizabeth Warren, she claimed to be Native American and she was like 1,024th or something like that. Okay. I just laughed because I'm like, okay, you're just being foolish. So I don't get bent out of shape over it. But what really struck me is this guy seems to be very, very disconnected from how everybody else generally defines words. And so I don't like it would be, I suppose you could say I'm really far right. And, maybe, it would make sense to say some conservatives are leftist to him. Okay. But if you're that far right, you you're not in a good place, man. There is never, you can look back through history and nobody that could make such a claim and say, I'm so far right that every one of these other major groups are all leftist to me, groups that are never considered to be leftist. Now, sometimes libertarians get the leftist tag because we have some views that are more that are more associated with left leaning people. We have some views that are considered more right leaning, right? So, like our views on Second Amendment, we're pretty absolutist. You want a tank? You should be able to have one. Okay, so in that sense, we would definitely be pretty far right. But we also would say something like, well, prostitution should not be illegal. Therefore, a lot of people might say, well, in that sense, you're a leftist. But that's for the rationale. We defy this spectrum that kind of floats with the left and the right. It's almost like we're somewhere in between, but up north, right? It seems like that because we adopt some of each. And I don't, and actually, that's not even a good way to say it. We don't adopt their ideas. We have a foundation for which all of our ideas come from. So, at any rate, this was the first video. And this wasn't, I don't remember the specifics on where it was. Most of these are going to be, these are all going to be in order with the exception of the last one. I saved his for last so I could talk about it after the intermission, but all the rest of them are in order. So this was the first one. And it was pretty wild just to listen because I don't think I've ever heard somebody, and I believe that's the guy. No, that's not the guy, but he was close to acknowledging that he might be a fascist. The guy Connor did say he was a fascist, and I'm pretty sure I've never heard anybody say I'm a fascist. It was pretty wild, and there was a lot of applause for some of these things that people were saying. I'm like, so it's not even like you've got one person that just seems to be misinformed. You have a room full of people that are misinformed. Now, I want to set the stage here and let you know, me and Mehdi Hasan, in this video, I agreed with them a lot. Elsewhere, I constantly disagreed. In fact, during COVID, he sat in on somebody's show on MSNBC, and he brought in a guy from the Cato Institute to give the argument that lockdowns could be supported by libertarians. And I did a counter video to that. It's like a 20-minute counter video. And look, I'm going to pat myself on the back here because I think I actually did pretty good on that video. I was pretty proud of it. I look back and I'm like, yeah, that was some quality content right there, buddy. So I'm not a big Mehdi Hasan fan, for his views. And so I was actually quite surprised how much I actually agreed with him. And I didn't agree with him because everybody else was like, oh, I'm such a right winger. That wasn't it. I just looked at the positions and I was like, yes, that is a position that I hold. No, that is not a position. Like many of the times I was like, Number one, that's not a position I hold. Number two, I'm not even sure where you're getting that information. Number three, you're using some words in ways that I would disagree with. And I think this is a problem. And we're not these, none of these are like high school students. At least these far, that doesn't look like it to me. They all look like they're in their 20s. Perhaps maybe a couple of them a little bit older, but probably not. They're probably all in their 20s. The guy we just saw, he looks like he might be a little bit older. He could be late 20s, maybe early 30s. But the rest of them, they seemed in their 20s. And I don't know the criteria for how old they're looking for, but and I think I've seen some older folk on there, but I was just wow, it was so wow. So let's get on to the second one, and we're gonna see. Let's see this one. This one I titled it assumptions. We're gonna talk about some assumptions here. So again, you know, you need to have your facts straight. You need to operate if you're gonna debate somebody. It's best if you operate on a definition that everybody is like a general definition that everybody uses. And if you're operating on a different definition, and you should know if you are like, look, I disagree with how things are being defined right now. And therefore, I have a different, better, whatever definition to utilize, then you should be aware of that. And then you should set that, you should lay that out at the very beginning and let people know, like, look, I say that I'm this, and here's why I think the current definition is not so good. And I just want it to be on the table so that you understand where I'm coming from. Because at the end of the day, what is a debate? A debate is an exchange of ideas with the hope that somebody somewhere is going to change their mind. Perhaps the person you're debating, or perhaps bystanders, people watching, right? Somebody, otherwise, why are you debating? I mean, I suppose you could just debate for the fun of it, but hopefully you would want to be more productive. So let's check out this one. This was about some assumptions.
So I'm going to be as respectful about this as possible, but the truth is your claim is completely bad faith. You do not care about being anti-crime. You yourself are pro-crime. Your side is pro-crime because you're
Okay, so I want to pause here really quickly, and I just want to lay out what the claim is. And you can kind of see it in the upper left-hand corner, but Mehdi Hasan's claim is that Donald Trump is pro-crime and pro-criminal. That's his claim. Okay, so this guy's like, look, you're pro-crime too. And then he's going to go into why.
progressive.
How am I pro-crime?
So I'll give you an example, right? So your side, not Donald Trump, has passed a series of laws in California. Let's go with California. It's where we are right now. It's where I'm from. I don't know. Are you from California?
No.
Or okay. So in California, for example, the state legislature, completely progressive, just passed a law that limits sex offender registration to 10 years. It was life before. That's pro-crime. The legislature in California, which is progressives again, has passed a law that says the voter-induced three-strike law is no longer absolute. If someone murders someone, stabs someone on 3 separate occasions, a judge now does not have to give them life. That's a progressive law. That is not. That is pro-crime. You support that, don't you?
Okay, so did you hear that? He's like, he sits down and he's like, well, actually, you're pro-crime. And he's like, here's why. And then he lays it out and he's like, here are these laws. And he said, he goes, we're going to talk about California because that's where I live. And he says, this law and this law got changed to be more beneficial to criminals. Okay. You can make an argument there and say that is a pro-crime direction. Okay. And then he says, do you agree? Well, wait a minute. How did you lead with, well, you're pro-crime? You should have asked him and said, define pro-crime. What do you mean when you say pro-crime? Because he clearly didn't even know. And then you can structure your argument and say, okay, based on your definition, I think you're pro-crime as well because, but even then I would advise against it. And I would say, you need to ask some more questions. And you say, okay, now that we have your definition, you need to be able to quickly think on your feet. And you need to be able to say, okay, what about this? And so you think of a topic that may challenge how he described his view of being pro-crime. And then you ask him, you say, do you support that? And maybe you think of a couple of them so you can find out, is he being consistent, right? And then you can say, well, as it turns out, you're pro-crime as well. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, none of that would have been useful because they were here to debate his claims. And his claim was Donald Trump is pro-crime. So in reality, what he should have done is led with, and he didn't. It didn't happen until like 40 minutes in when somebody did this. He was like, okay, he should have said, what do you mean by pro-crime? Okay. How do you see Donald Trump as pro-crime? And then Hasan could have laid it out and said, well, I believe that pro-crime means this. And here's what Donald Trump has done that leads me to believe that he's pro-crime. And then if there was somebody, because Hasan is progressive, and so, or liberal or whatever, that's where he is. And so you could then ask him and say, okay, what about some of these issues? Where do you stand? Because it's always possible that your opponent could be progressive and actually agree with you against some other progressive ideas, as we'll see in a few moments. So this guy first starts off, he's just making assumptions. This is not a good debate tactic. And you make yourself look like a fool. Let's continue.
Don't support sex offenders coming off a list. I think they should be on for life.
Okay.
Oh, so there we go. Right. And let me back it up so that we get the full context there.
A judge now does not have to give them life. That's a progressive law. That is pro-crime. You support that, don't you?
I actually don't support sex offenders coming off a list. I think they should be on for life.
Okay, so you disagree with progressives.
So hold on. You and I both agree that sex offending is a bad thing, especially child sex offending, right?
It seems like you and I agree on that.
I agree on that.
The legislature of California doesn't.
So I'm not here to debate the legislature of California. I'm here to debate Donald Trump being pro-crime.
Okay, so see what I mean? Like it's almost like he wanted to debate something else that was not Hasan's position. And he's like, well, you're progressive. And this is kind of this is a tactic that a lot of people use. They'll say, oh, you're a libertarian. This one libertarian over here said this. Well, okay, but that doesn't mean that I agree with them. And especially in libertarian case, because like libertarians love to disagree with each other. Okay. Would disagree with each other with each other just to disagree sometimes. That's how it feels, at least. Okay. So again, this was a poor way of trying to debate. And now again, I'm gonna give them a little bit of grace in the context of, can you debate some of the tactics. I'm just kind of pointing out like, hey, here's a flaw. Maybe they'll watch it. Maybe they'll go, oh, okay, I see where I made my mistake. I'm going to do better the next time, right? Hopefully that'll happen. Hopefully if you're watching and you weren't one of the participants and you go, oh, I see, I understand. That's not a good way to approach a debate. That's not how I win. More importantly, that's not how I convince somebody else. Because again, if your goal is like, what is your goal in the debate? My goal whenever I'm debating or disagreeing with somebody is to convince them otherwise. That's what my goal is. And my goal isn't actually to convince you in real time, in the moment. I want to plant a seed. I want to plant a little seed of doubt and let it work in your mind. Okay. And this is not some devious thing. I'm not like, oh man, I'm going to do this and, it's just going to ruin his mind. No, I'm just like, look, I know that if I'm debating you, chances are you're debating me and you're trying to do the same thing. Your focus is to convince me. So now we both have the same focus. Convince the other person they're wrong and I'm right. Okay. With that in mind, there's not a lot of room to say, well, you made a good point. I'm going to have to think about that. I mean, it does happen, but that tends not to be the case. So what I'm trying to do, and this is what I call it the, that's a good point moment. When I used to talk to my mother, God bless her soul, she was a diehard Republican, conservative Republican. And sometimes I would talk to her about libertarian ideas. And every now and then she would be like, that's a good point. That's all I needed. Right? Because now I know that she's acknowledged, hey, or whoever I'm talking to, but in this case, my mom, they've acknowledged, hey, you made a good point. So now, being the normal human being, they're gonna think about it probably. They might not, but they might, right? And that's my aim. My aim is to give you something to think about. I talked about this the other night. I said, the idea of one of the good ones, how like people, they'll be like, oh, I hate them gays. And then somebody's like, but I'm gay. And they're like, and you like me. And they're like, yeah, but you're one of the good ones, right? That is that's a door that gets opened. And so then one person is one of the good ones. And then eventually it's like, okay, well, you're also one of the good ones too. And then eventually there becomes, in theory and in practice too, so many good ones that you eventually have to challenge your own views. And you say, well, maybe there's a lot more good gay folk or black folk or whatever. Doesn't matter what it is, right? But maybe they're not as bad. You can still disagree with them, but you're like, maybe they're not as bad as I thought they were, right? And so that's what I'm hoping to accomplish when I debate somebody. So, good pause here. Let me jump into the chat here real quick, just because I don't want to get behind. John, how are you? I don't know how being a fascist has anything to do with work performances. It's so strange. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. That I'm saving it for after the intermission. So we'll get to that. That Liberty Lady, your double dose of Liberty Dad. That's right. I was streaming this morning. I'm streaming now. I didn't mention it earlier, but my family is out of town. So I'm like, I could just be, watch TV or, play Minecraft and, which I know sounds kind of silly. Like, dude, you play Minecraft? I have a 6-year-old, so bear with me. Okay. I play Minecraft, one, for a little bit of entertainment, and then also so I connect with my son. And like the other day I played, and then, I picked him up from somewhere and we were talking. He's like, did you play Minecraft? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, what happened? What'd you do? And I was like, telling him some of the things that I, explored and had found and blah, blah, blah. So, but my family's out of town now. And so like I had to make some decisions, and I said, well, let's do some more streaming. How about that? Let's have a little bit of fun. Let's see. Shelbs. I want a ruthless, hate-filled state, but I don't want anyone to be upset by this belief I hold over your heads. Are you, I think you're talking about the people, I think. I'm not sure. You might want to clarify. It's in quotes, so I assume you're talking about one of the participants. And if you are, I agree. Some of those folk did come across that way. It was like, they were like, I had these terrible ideas. I thought they were terrible ideas. And then when they were challenged, like, I think there was one person, and I don't have that clip. It was an hour and 40 minutes. I had to make some tough calls. There was a lot of clips. I mean, I actually considered just playing the whole darn thing. But then I was like, an hour and 40 minutes. And the way I talk, that'd been like a 3-hour show or 4-hour show. And I'm like, does anybody care about my opinions on every single comment that was made that much? I mean, that's pushing it. Okay. I mean, I appreciate my audience, but I think you wouldn't appreciate that. So I just made some hard decisions. But there was a person who, when they were challenged on some of their ideas, they were like, oh, no, not for me. For other people. Was basically what they said. And I was just like, and Hasan actually said it. He was like, oh, so you mean it for, them, but not for you. It's like a, good for me, not for thee kind of a situation. So, but yeah, there were a lot of people that came across that way. Let's see. Steve says right-wing politics is defined by a lack of critical thinking. These people's entire worldview is completely incoherent. That's why whenever any pressure is applied, they look like clowns. Yes. And again, it depends on what we mean by right-wing politics. If you mean it like as a whole, then I probably would agree. But I have some ideas that would be considered. I have some beliefs that would be considered right-wing. Like I said a moment ago, I also hold some views that would be considered left-wing. So again, if we're talking about specific things, then I would disagree. But if we're talking about as a whole, especially if you're talking about the far right, like if you're just talking about your average, everyday conservative, well, again, I agree with them on some things. I don't always agree with the logic that they use to get there. And sometimes I do. It varies. It depends. So, but yeah, there we are. All right, let's get back to the next video clip here. And so let's see this one. This one was good. I like this one because this is where Hasan again notes something that people could have asked about and they didn't. So let's play this.
Hunter Biden was pardoned by his father. He did crack cocaine,
he should have done
and
that.
he had hookers there too.
I'm with you all.
But then why don't you claim that Biden? Why don't you claim that Biden?
I think Joe Biden in that
pro-crime?
instance was pro-crime. He shouldn't have done it.
Well,
he
so
shouldn't
he
have
was
done it.
overall
He
pro-crime
shouldn't have
just
done it.
because he did that.
No, but Joe Biden didn't just. So if it was just a pardon,
Okay.
then you'd be fine. But I already mentioned, there's also the fact that Joe Biden wasn't actually convicted criminal in office. Trump has committed crimes. Trump hangs around with criminals. He spent much of the 80s hanging around with the New York mob. He hung around with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
Well,
okay, so we're going to pause here. So first and foremost, I can appreciate Hasan's consistency. So his argument is Trump was pro-crime. A large part of his argument was he pardoned all the January 6th individuals, and there were all of them, and there were a number of them that actually had committed some actual crimes, like they assaulted somebody, or like it was either a violent crime or a property crime. So we're not talking about. He's not talking about the people that the grandma that was just walking through the Capitol. At least he didn't mention it in the episode. So I'm going to assume in good faith that he means people that in any other situation, most of us would say, yeah, that's a crime. You can't do that. Okay. And they were found guilty in a court of law. And then Donald Trump, he pardoned them. And then here, the guy brings up Hunter Biden. He brings it up like a dunk. He's like, oh, yeah, well, what about Hunter Biden? And he's like, yeah, actually, I think that Joe Biden shouldn't have pardoned him either. And that is, in a sense, pro-crime. Now, where I think a lot of these young people made their big mistake is not really focusing in on disputing what does it mean to be pro-crime. Now, I think one person kind of touched upon it, and they were like, well, just because you pardon somebody doesn't necessarily make you pro-crime. You might, they brought up 2 points. They said, number one, you could pardon somebody. Well, I think I think their argument was, what if Trump had pardoned people to help bring people together? That was a kind of an odd argument. I don't know that I agree with it necessarily. Maybe if he was trying to, bring some coherency or, bring his group together around an idea, then perhaps that might be an argument to make. I personally wouldn't have went with that. But the other one that they made, they said, and this is a good one, actually, I think, they said, okay, well, a lot of times people will take a plea deal because perhaps their lawyer says the evidence is against you. If you try to fight this, you're likely not to win and your punishment could be worse. Okay. Or, hey, you just don't have a strong case, and if, you might win, you might lose. If you lose, it could be worse for you. Right. So there's various reasons why somebody might accept a guilty plea, even though maybe maybe they believe that they're still innocent. Okay. Those were good things to push back on. But I think most of them failed to recognize, like, hey, his argument is pro-crime because you pardoned him. Well, if that's the bar for pro-crime, then practically every president, I mean, I haven't looked it up, but I'm going to make an assumption that every president has pardoned somebody. And if you've pardoned somebody, they're guilty of a crime, at least as established in a court of law. Now, I might disagree with some of those cases and say, yeah, this one should have been thrown out. This one maybe should have had jury nullification or some other situation. Maybe they should have just won. Like, it's unfortunate, but maybe they had, the prosecutor was better than your defense lawyer. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they were convicted. That's what a pardon is, right? With the exception of Joe Biden, where he, I believe Hunter Biden hadn't actually been convicted of any crimes. And he said, I'm pardoning him of all crimes now and in the future, from in the past and whatever. No, I'm sorry, not the future. He can't do that. He said from the past. He's like, any crime that he may or may not have committed in the past, he's pardoned from, right? So, like, I think that's a poor use of a pardon. But at the end of the day, in most cases, you're pardoning somebody who has been found guilty in a court of law. So your only option is to say, I disagree with the pardon altogether. But I can't appreciate Hasan saying, look, Donald Trump, he is pro-crime because of these reasons. And for the very same reasons, he actually kind of wormed around it a little bit, because what he actually said was, in this instance, he was pro-crime. And I don't, doesn't really make sense if you think about it. Like, you're not going to be like, well, in this instance, you were a drunkard, right? You were just drunk. drunkard tends to be like a description of behavior over time, right? Pro crime would be like a position that you might hold either directly because you say you do, or through your actions over time. So I would have been like, well, the word pro crime would suggest that you have to be able to show over time how they're pro crime. And he actually did with Trump, but he kind of weaseled around it because he was like, well, Trump was found guilty on 34 counts. I wouldn't consider that pro crime, because if you just say, well, you've been found guilty, therefore you are pro crime. Well, a lot of people are found guilty and they're not guilty. So while they're found, before they get exonerated, are they still pro crime? Right? Like would you say, oh, this person's pro crime because they were found guilty? And then if they were exonerated later, you'd be like, well, I guess they're not pro crime now. Like, so you see how this argument really doesn't work, but they missed it. And part of it again is because they're young. Let's continue.
I can keep going.
Jeffrey Epstein lived in West Palm Beach, the area, and that's the closest golf course you can go to.
Do you think?
And he's very,
do you think
very
golf?
Like, even okay, now I'm gonna hit him a little hard. For a young person, even that's a bad argument, because his argument is like, well, Jeffrey Epstein, because what he's trying to do is trying to say like Donald Trump is not pro crime for having associated with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein associated because that was the nearest golf course. That's not really. That's a terrible argument.
Trump is in the Epstein
so
files.
he paid.
Do you think Donald Trump is in the Epstein
As soon
files?
as Trump found out.
Do you think Donald Trump is in the Epstein files?
No, I do not.
Is Elon Musk lying?
Let me explain this.
Okay.
He lived in the area in Mar-a-Lago, near Mar-a-Lago. So he bought, obviously, a ticket to go in there.
Yep.
As soon as Trump found out that Epstein had done all those bad things, immediate ban from Mar-a-Lago.
But okay.
Immediate ban from
Mar-a-Lago.
Yes, it is.
That's not
yes,
true.
it is. 100%.
In fact, Ghislaine Maxwell recruited some of the girls that were abused.
So they got this cool little fact check up on here, and it says a book. You might not be able to read it, depending if you're watching from a phone or whatnot, but it says a book called the Grifters Club alleged Trump banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago for hitting on another member's daughter. Okay, so apparently it was for a different reason, and in that particular case, so let's just kind of lay this out. If I own a country club, and I've got one member that allegedly hits on another member, and then or another member's daughter, and then that other member comes to me and complaining, I might not be willing to risk losing members to save one person. So I may ban them for the greater business good. So it's just because Epstein was banned in itself is not necessarily evidence that he's not pro-crime, but by virtue of Donald Trump and, just mere association is itself also not evidence that he's pro-crime. So you see, so neither one of the sides necessarily work. Again, this all depends on how do you define pro-crime. I would say a criminal is pro-crime, like somebody that engages in crime repeatedly. So if you show that Donald Trump has engaged in crime repeatedly, then that would be a worthwhile argument. But if you just say, well, he was associating with this bad character, a lot of people associate with bad characters. And I don't think that necessarily makes them pro-crime. That's guilt by association. I don't believe in guilt by association. Okay. Now, in the court of public opinion, it might work. But if we're talking about, at the level of should somebody be president, should they be punished? Are they guilty? If we're thinking of it in terms of legal, well, then the bar is much higher. So, there's a lot of things to consider here. All right, let's continue listening to this guy.
From Mar-a-Lago.
So listen to this.
From Mar-a-Lago. That's pretty outrageous, right?
Elon Musk tweeted that out in a fit of rage, okay? Do you really...
He's like a fit of rage. It's like this young guy just keeps looking for ways to weasel around the claim. Right. And here's the problem. You're not really addressing it. Okay. You can't just be like, oh, he just did it in a fit of rage. He was just angry. Maybe he was, but he still said it. Elon Musk still said that the reason that Trump doesn't want the Epstein files out is because he's in them. And now maybe it was a fit of rage, but you have to make the argument like, could he have possibly known? Is there any evidence supporting this, et cetera, et cetera? There are better arguments, but just to be like, yeah, he was just angry. I mean, and that's possible. I mean, people do say things when they're angry, as Hasan points out here right now.
People tell the truth when they're angry.
Do you really
the
think
truth comes out when people are angry sometimes?
So
we might see that today.
Kash Patel literally said that Elon Musk had no access to the Epstein files. So
Kash Patel said that Epstein killed himself. Do you agree with that?
Whatever he says goes. Then yeah, I don't care.
He knows whatever he says goes.
He knows more information than I do.
That's wild. Whatever he says goes. So is that Kash Patel before he was appointed or Kash Patel after he was appointed? Because he actually said two different things, right? He believed that the Epstein files had something in them and that they needed to be released. Then after he got in office, all of a sudden that kind of went away. Pam Bondi, I can't remember if she said anything prior to being nominated and prior to getting her position, but after her position, she absolutely did. And then she later basically said the opposite. Okay. So this whole, whatever they say, they have more knowledge than me. There is some truth to that. They do have more knowledge than you. Pam Bondi probably knows the truth, right? Or she at least knows whether or not what she is saying is true, according to what she knows. But she definitely has said different things. Kash Patel has said different things. Donald Trump has certainly said different things around this. So this idea that you can argue and say, yeah, well, they know more than me. They said it. Okay, well, does that apply to Joe Biden? Does that apply to liberals? Does that apply to Democrats? So for me, I want to hold people accountable. And I want to be consistent, because consistency is where you get the best results. If you're inconsistent, then you're going to get very poor results, because you're going to say like, oh, well, this person should be punished for doing this thing, but maybe not this person because I really need them to do a job for me. Okay, well, then, you would be, it could be argued that you might be pro-crime in that particular case, right? I wouldn't do it necessarily, but somebody else could, who kind of makes that argument. But at the end of the day, you are allowing bad things to happen for your own selfish needs. That's ultimately what it ends up being. And I don't like it. For as far as I'm concerned, like, look, let's talk about the Epstein file just for a second. Because I've seen a lot of people say, they're like, well, what if we don't have a functioning government? What if so many people in our government are guilty? Then send them to jail. All of them. Don't care. Start over. I don't want a government that is propped up by perverts harming children and only want to punish the people that are not on my team. That is not acceptable. And so, and again, if you're going to play this game of like, well, this person said this, and so I'm okay with it. Or if you're going to be like, yeah, somebody said this in a fit of rage and, and that just happens, no big deal. You're basically running cover for your team, which means so long as your team is in power, then people that are doing bad things will continue to do bad things. And in a way, if you have a more loose definition, if somebody has a more loose definition of pro-crime, that would include you. I don't want to be considered pro-crime. That's not why I oppose both sides. I'm just like, evil is evil. I don't really give a damn who it is. So let's get on to our next clip here. We've got, I think, one more? Is that one more? No, we've got several more. We got several more here. And then we're going to, the last one. So we just did the third clip. We got 3 more clips. And then we're going to jump on over to this last guy. And then we're going to talk about it. So let's see. We played the third clip. Yeah, this one. Okay, let's do it. Bam.
I want to start, like, what is your connection to the Constitution, and why do you love it so much? Like, what makes it so important that Trump would defy something like the Constitution to you personally?
Great questions. My first connection.
No. Stop. Just stop. I'm kind of on the fence, but I'm leaning toward no. That is not a great question. If you are in this country, you should value the Constitution. You can disagree with it and you can say, hey, like it's inefficient, it's all these other things, and that's fine. You could say it's incomplete. You could say, you know, if you want to disagree with it on like, say, functional grounds, or, you know, you have a better idea for how our government should be constructed, but that's fine. But you should value it because it's literally all we got. And right now, it is the document that says, government, you have restraints on the people. That's what we should all want. So I don't actually think of that as a good question. But in fairness, when you watch the whole video, if you compare it to some of the other things that people were asking, I guess it is a good question.
Is I'm an American citizen. I naturalized American citizen, took a pledge to this country, to the Constitution. As a previous speaker has said, Constitution's not perfect. A lot of things I don't like about it. I don't like the Second Amendment. There's various amendments. I don't like the way the Senate is set up. I'm sure there's things you don't like.
Right. So see how he's like, I don't like the Second Amendment. And he's like, I don't like the way the Senate is set up. And I've heard that before. Some people disagree with certain elements. You know, they don't like the, you know, maybe the bicameral. They don't like the, you know, how we apportion representatives, whatever. Right. And so if you disagree with some of those things, that's great. You know, I may disagree with you back depending on what it is, but that's great. But I think you got to have a vested interest in it because that's literally what we got. It's what we got to work with. So wild.
About the Constitution. The difference is, I don't think you can just illegally defy the Constitution. I don't think each and every one of us can make up whatever we want. Certainly presidents who are elected with an oath, right? Donald Trump took an oath to preserve, protect, defend the Constitution. And now when he's asked on television, isn't it your job to uphold the Constitution? He said on NBC, I don't know, which goes against his oath. And I'm identifying specific amendments where he is violating. He's only 6 months.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. I want to see that. I want to see that fact check, see what they said.
To uphold the Constitution. He said on NBC, I don't know, which goes against.
Okay, so there's the, let me read it here. It says, President Trump was asked by NBC if everyone, including those in the country illegally, is entitled to due process under the Fifth Amendment. Trump responded, I don't know. Okay, so they were, you know, so I think his framing is incorrect. I still think that Trump should have had a better answer. I think it's pretty bad that a president would say, I don't know to a question like that. That seems pretty important. And it seems like you should have an opinion. Now, you can have an opinion that disagrees and says, well, you know, even though that the Supreme Court has ruled that, yes, the Constitution does apply to even illegal immigrants, to any person, where it says person, it applies to anybody that's within the boundaries of the United States. Where it says citizen, it applies to citizens, right? You can disagree with that, but you should have an answer. So I don't really agree with his framing, but I also have a problem with Trump's answer because you're the president. You should have an answer for that. Now, if it's a more nuanced, if you're like, hey, there's this Supreme Court case, what do you think about that? Maybe that's a different one, right? Depending on the situation, depending on what the nature of it is. But I think something as big as the Fifth Amendment, one of the amendments, I mean, there's not even 30 of them. Okay. So like, it's not hard. And he's like 78 years old. He should have come across this information at some point before that interview and developed an opinion. All right.
Against his oath. And I'm identifying specific amendments where he is violating. He's only 6 months into his presidency, defying the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the 14th Amendment. He wants to defy the 22nd Amendment and be president for a third term. This is the problem we have right now. Free speech is under assault. The free press is under assault. Due process is under assault. The right to be in your home and not be invaded by federal agents, the Fourth Amendment, is under assault. So that, for me, is a problem.
So this is wild because I agree with him. And I don't want to agree with Mehdi Hasan. I'm not a big fan of his. He supported the lockdowns during COVID. He's got a lot of other ideas. He hates the Second Amendment, as that Liberty lady over here said. She said, 2A is my favorite amendment. I'm a huge fan of it. Big fan, right? I mean, that's a weird way to say it, like I'm some sort of groupie for the Second Amendment. But I think it's a great thing. I think the First Amendment and the Second Amendment are absolutely wonderful things. You know, there could be trouble, right? People abuse it, but overall, on net balance, wonderful things, you know? So it's just like, I'm at awe that I'm agreeing with a guy that I would, if you had asked me yesterday before I watched any of these videos, if you had said, DL, will you ever agree with Mehdi Hasan? I would say, well, there's probably a time or two that I will. Broken clock is right twice a day. So yeah, probably I'd agree with him somewhere. I didn't expect to agree with him so much. When he's talking about the federal agents coming into your home, that's where Donald Trump had said, like, look, our border, or not a border agent, but our ICE agents, if they think you have an illegal immigrant, we can just come in your home without a warrant. Excuse me. No, right? Stop. Full stop right there. No way. That is an invasion of my property. It's literally an amendment. No, unacceptable. And here I am agreeing with him. Yeah, and it's wild. Let's continue.
Okay. Well, I'd like to start to say I really don't find the Constitution that important. I find it to be like a 300-year-old document. And it was created to defy the country that subjugated your ancestors in India. And then your parents probably moved from India to Britain. And then you move here to tell us that we should listen to a piece of paper that you were never even connected to begin with.
I could cry. Like, what? It's a 300-year-old document. It's just a piece of paper. And he's not making like a Lysander Spooner argument. I mean, I think he does touch upon it, but that's not really the foundation of his argument. Like Lysander Spooner, he made the argument that it is just a piece of paper and that it was useless in actually protecting people in the way that it says it's supposed to. Now, I would argue, I'll get to that. Actually, I'll counter his argument in just a minute when he mentions it. But up until this point, he seems to just treat it like it's just this piece of paper. It has no value, whatever. Okay, well, what replaces it? What? And that's fine. Like, we can have a conversation. I think it's a futile conversation. How are we going to replace it? Like what is the likelihood that we're going to convince all of our fellow Americans and be like, you know what? This Constitution isn't such a good idea anyway. Let's draft a new government. I mean, in theory, it could happen. But what is the likelihood? So ridiculously tiny that I don't think it's worth entertaining, right? Unless you're like over some beers, at the fire pit and you're just chatting it up with some buddies. Like, sure, maybe entertain it there. But if you're actually having a conversation where you're trying to communicate ideas to people and challenge their ideas, I don't see it. But furthermore, this is what I mean when I go back to that quote at the beginning of the show, and I said, our students' ignorance is not a failing of the educational system. It's a crowning achievement. Efforts by several generations of philosophers and reformers have combined to produce a generation of know-nothings. I think this is a know-nothing like comment. Like and I get it. Some of my libertarian peers, particularly my anarchist friends, they're going to dispute it, but they're going to come and say, this is what I would replace it with. This is why it's a failure. This is why it's not so good. Now, I would disagree with them on many of their ideas, but they're not coming with a superficial idea necessarily. This is very superficial. When you mention that it's 300 years old, I don't care if it's 300 years old, 30 years old, or 3,000 years old. Like, I'm not particularly religious, but scripture was written around 2,000 years ago. Some of it may be a little bit longer, right? And there are still some good content in the Bible. There are some good passages that have meaning, that have value today, even if you're not religious. So the idea that age has anything to do with whether or not a document is of any value is not an argument. And then furthermore, like if you look at our Constitution, you look at the way it was set up, it was designed for the people, by the people, so that we would not be run roughshod by our government and that we could choose how we're governed. Now, Ben Franklin, when he came out of the Constitutional Convention, he was asked, what, sir, have you given us? And he said, a republic if you can keep it. Right? We're going to touch upon that in just a second. Let's listen to what else he has to say.
So I want to say, like, if I don't care about it, why do you care about it so much?
How do you run a country without any kind of laws or due process?
I-
And by the way, you do care about it, because without the First Amendment, you wouldn't be sitting here.
Well, I agree with the First Amendment, and I think.
So do you
every
agree with
country-
Donald Trump's crackdown on the First Amendment? He's imprisoning people for their speech. He's threatening free speech media organizations. He's threatening peaceable assembly. These are all rights under the First Amendment. Why aren't you bothered by that as a conservative who claims to love the First Amendment?
So I don't like the First Amendment. I like free speech.
Okay.
So
What? Look, I try to take it easy on the young folk. I was young once myself. I get it. You're kind of on the dumb side. I was dumb. Okay? But this is pretty bad.
First Amendment is what guarantees free speech.
It-
I'm
it
from the UK,
guarantees
by the
free
way.
speech.
I'm from the UK,
Yeah, and you guys
which
don't
is a
have that.
democracy. We don't have the First Amendment. No, that's one of the things I do like
Yeah.
about the Constitution. I wish the UK did have a First Amendment.
So people
I'm a
that get
journalist.
arrested for praying outside abortion clinics
So-
and stuff like that.
So,
Right?
so you're opposed to people being arrested for speech crimes, I assume.
Well, it depends what it is. If it's like the
Oh,
people.
so you're like one of the previous speakers. You don't.
No.
As long as there's someone who agrees with you, you don't mind the
no,
crackdown.
no, I support.
Either we consistently support
I
principles
support
or we
free
don't.
speech 100.
See, here we go again. I agree with Hasan. Either you consistently support principles or you don't. And if you don't, here's the problem. If you say it's okay to not consistently support fundamental elements of our Constitution, then what you're basically saying is, so long as we're in power, it's okay. But you're also sending a message that, hey, if you get in power, it's okay because that's what we established. You may claim you're not saying that. You may say, no. I believe this and this and this and this. But what other people are going to hear is, you do not value consistency in this document. So therefore, why should I? Right? If I'm opposed to this guy, let's say, like, I assume that this guy is, he's in opposition to liberals. So let's say I'm a liberal and I'm listening to him and I go, he doesn't care about the First Amendment when it comes to his opponents. So therefore, there's no need for me to either. So then I can just kind of rub my hands together and be like, can't wait till my team gets into office. We're going to show that guy. And he set the stage for it. He basically laid the foundation. This is why you have to consistently hold your team accountable just as much as the other team. Because when your team does wrong, they set precedent, especially in our law. And then other people will go, well, you did it, so can I. And then they will. And then they'll punish people maybe on your team. And it's actually more important if you think Trump is on your team, it is more important that you hold him accountable than if you hold Joe Biden or the Democrats or the liberals. It is actually more important. This is why, people will say, why do you, some people have argued with me and they'll say, oh, you're supporting this because, you hate America, you this, and I've had people come at me and I'm like, no, it's for immigration. I will argue against deportation and against some of these, things like agents coming into your home. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm protecting me by defending that person. I'm protecting me. Let's continue. No, we got a couple seconds left.
Okay.
I don't think anyone.
So do you think Donald Trump is defying the Constitution by cracking down on the First Amendment?
So I think he's cracking down on free speech, like the deportation of Mahmoud Khalil, who was
just released from prison by a judge saying his First Amendment rights were violated.
And I agree with the judge, and I disagree with Trump deporting them. But I think that's more a matter of free speech and not the Constitution.
I'm not even sure. I just don't know. I really don't. That is so bizarre. How if you want to envision free speech that is not coupled to the First Amendment, then you have to describe, okay, how does this free speech operate? Under what framework does it operate? And then we can debate whether or not that framework is consistent or is good or is anything. But he doesn't seem to have a clue. Here's what I think is happening. I think that we have a lot of people, particularly young people, that are basically playing team sports, but they're playing it in the absolute worst way. And they're this person supports me, or at least mostly supports me, so therefore I will support them, and therefore I will make excuses for all of their bad behavior. And they're totally ignorant of the fact that all of those excuses will come back to bite them in the ass. That's what I think is happening. I think they don't realize the fire that they're playing with by being all over the map, because they don't seem to have any fundamental principles that say, absolutely not, no way, no how. I'll give you a great example. Okay. I'm going to invoke my buddy Dave Smith. Now, Dave Smith and I disagree on some things. He supported Donald Trump before the election, and he's been ripping into him, in the last month or so for his actions. Okay. Now, I disagreed with him on supporting Trump. I thought that was, I thought that was foolhardy. I don't think he should have. I disagreed with his rationale, and that's fine. We don't have to get into that. But Dave has certain principles, and when he laid out certain principles that were extremely important to him, like being anti-war. So when Trump did some things, even though he supported him, he said, "Whoa, full stop, no, absolutely not." And he was just in a debate the other day where somebody pulled out, I did a show on it. Somebody pulled out this list and they're like, "You said this about Trump. You said this about Trump. You said this about Trump." And he said, "Yes, I did. Because I was correct. I stand by it when I said it. I stand by it today." That's what it means to have principles. Now, we're not always going to be consistent with our principles because we're human beings. So you can find fault in anyone. Like, unless they're Jesus, you're going to find fault in them. Okay? Period. You're going to find inconsistency somewhere. But it should be the case that we should strive so that people have a difficult time finding that fault. It should not be easy. Like, I find that this guy, in just a couple of minutes, is all over the map, and he doesn't seem to have any foundational principle that I can identify. I can't identify it based on what he said. He did not articulate it. In fact, he seemed to articulate the exact opposite, that he didn't have one, and that he's just kind of winging it from the hip. That's not good. And he's going to learn the hard way when Trump is out of office, possibly in 26 when we have the midterms, right? Because I'm presuming that he supports Republicans more so than he would Democrats. I'm making an assumption there, okay? And if that's correct, then he's going to find out the hard way, as many of us had or have. He's going to find out the hard way that you have to be principled and you have to hold your team accountable. And if somebody says your team did this thing that you keep saying is a bad thing and people should be held accountable for, you should be one of the first ones to yell at them and say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." Right? All right. This is wild. Let's, let me see how many comments we got in here. No, I think we can do the comments in a minute. Let's try to get through. We got, I think, 2 more videos. Then we'll do our intermission. Let's continue. Let's see what we got here.
Good to meet you,
Great.
sir.
I'm Mehdi.
Mehdi, great to meet you. My name is Kai. Do you, Mehdi, believe that the Constitution is important and good?
Overall, yes.
Do you believe that that Constitution can be eroded through democratic processes?
What do you mean by erode?
The original intention of the Constitution being destroyed through a purely, democratic or legal process?
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Okay. I do. I think it can. So, like, I did a show 2 weeks ago, maybe, and this is where I went through a video of Antonin Scalia, the late Antonin Scalia, the Supreme Court Justice. Phenomenal guy, very brilliant. And I walked through one of his speeches. Or maybe I didn't walk through the whole speech, but I pulled out some clips that I thought were interesting, and we talked about it. And he talks about this concept of a living constitution, for which I disagree with. And he was like, "Look, I'm a contextualist. You got this living constitution." He believes that you can, constructionist. He believed that the proper way to interpret the Constitution was through understanding what the words meant by the people who wrote them. You go back and you find out what the words meant. And just to give you a super duper easy to understand idea of what that means, like 50, let's see, we're in 2025, 50, 75. So maybe, I don't know the exact date, but maybe 70 years ago, maybe longer. I'm not really sure exactly. But once upon a time, the word gay meant happy. You might actually be able to say, "Man, that dude's a gay dude." And you weren't talking about sexuality in any way. You were talking about just their disposition, right? their mood, like, what kind of person were they? They're a happy person. Well, now the word has changed. So if you read something where somebody's like, if you're reading a novel from like 100 years ago and they're like, he walked around gaily, that doesn't mean that he was walking around doing stereotypical gay stuff like, the hands or whatever, right? That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about, hey, they had a particular emotion. They had maybe a smile on their face, so on and so forth, right? So that would be constructionism. You're going back and you're like, what did that word mean when the person who wrote it, right? What did it mean? And then you might say, okay, well, it means something different today. And so then if you want to interpret that text, you interpret it properly with the definition that was understood at the time. Okay. Same thing with the Constitution. And so, and that's where I fall. I fall on the construction. As I fall in on constructionism. Okay. So to address this guy's question, he's like, well, do you believe that through the democratic process, it could be eroded? Yes, because our democratic process doesn't force people necessarily to review, to interpret the Constitution with a constructionist attitude. There is room in our democratic processes to be somebody that's more aligned with, say, what was it? What did I say was the living Constitution? And then there's another variant that kind of tries to bridge the gap between the two, and that came around the 14th Amendment. That was the nature of the show that I did. Right. So that's another way of interpreting it. And through those interpretations, you can come to different conclusions that I believe actually erode this document. So I think Hasan is incorrect. We'll see what this guy says.
Okay.
I think if you're democratically amending the Constitution per the rules of the Constitution, that's fine. If
Okay.
we could find a constitutional way to get rid of the Second Amendment, I'd be pro that.
So let's pose a hypothetical wherein the entire population of the United States has drastically changed.
Yes.
And the population now has completely different intentions about what to do with the country. Let's say it wants to give it all back to Mexico, dismantling the United States of America. If that's the case, then what's the use of the Constitution? It hasn't defended the country. In fact, it's allowed for its destruction.
I don't understand the premise. How did the whole country change?
Demographic replacement, mass migration. I mean, we're seeing a change in
right.
demographics.
Okay. So there's a lot there. I don't know that I'm going to try to cover all of that. There was a lot. So I think this is where I think a lot of people that are really pro deportation are getting it wrong. I think what they're looking at and they're saying there's a lot of immigrants coming over here and they are changing the culture. They are changing the law. But the truth, and this especially wouldn't apply very well to illegal immigrants who don't have nearly the ability to like vote. I mean, and let's not get into like they're not all voting. Like I could even accept that maybe some of them sneak in and make a vote, but there's not nearly enough of them that are doing this. Even if we accept that premise, there's not enough to say mass migration has caused all of this. The problem, I think, is demonstrated right here in that room. These young people don't understand the Constitution. They don't understand the purpose of it. They don't understand the value of being consistent. And they're not alone. Now, they may be wild and crazy when it comes to some of their right-wing ideas, but you got plenty of people on the left that are just as wild and crazy. And they're just as willing to abuse the Constitution for their purposes. And in that episode where I talked about Antonin Scalia, he mentions that. He's like, look, people on the left, they're just as willing to abuse the Constitution to get their way as people on the right. But both sides are just as guilty. And he named 2 different Supreme Court cases that came out on the same day where one side was gnashing their teeth, the other side was happy, and then vice versa, right? And they were happy not because they understood jurisprudence or judicial review or interpreting the Constitution. They were happy because they got the outcome they wanted. We're in trouble. We got a problem. Houston, we have a problem. We do. And it's not the immigrants. You can claim it's the migrants coming over here. And yeah, you can make an argument and say, well, you get more migrants, they change the census, and that gives more voting power, to these particular areas. But at the end of the day, there's not enough of them that it really is, because you're looking at the country as a whole. But when I look at the country as a whole, I see that the majority of people are Americans that have these bad ideas, that are ignorant of the Constitution, that are ignorant of its purpose, of its value. And this is not a right thing. It's not a left thing. This is you have a republic if you can keep it. But we're not doing such a good job of keeping it. Now, he was the guy, I got it mixed up. He was the guy that kind of, I don't know that he made an argument in the same context as Lysander Spooner, where he said, hey, the Constitution has been useless in stopping it. But I would argue back that the real cause is that we, one, allowed ourselves to become ignorant. And then number two, we've been kind of lackadaisical about enforcing the Constitution, our rule of law, as it was set up and designed to be done. Like, think of it this way. The Constitution is a contract. Okay? It, like any other contract. A contract, every contract that you have in this entire country is nothing more than a piece of paper, right? The contract I have with my house, with the loan on my house with the bank, piece of paper. So if they don't enforce the rule, if I don't enforce the rule, whatever, like if we don't enforce the agreements that the other person has made, the other party has made, then guess what? That contract is worthless. Every contract, every piece of paper is worthless. If people aren't willing to say, no, this is the way it's designed. This is what it's supposed to do. No, that's wrong. Right? But first, we got to not be ignorant. Man, I tell you. All right, last clip, and then we'll go to intermission here. I think it's the same guy.
You believe that dismantling the Constitution is
about the
okay
first,
when it's
fourth,
about parts
fifth,
of the Constitution
14th,
that you disagree
22nd
with.
Amendments.
You would be fine getting rid of the Second Amendment, even though that would be a dismantling of the Constitution.
No, because it would
Your
be done
problem-
via constitutional means. I'm not the one sitting here like your pal.
Okay.
Okay. He's wrong. The guy in the blue is wrong. Okay? I want you to think about this. He's like, well, you want to get rid of the Second Amendment, so you want to dismantle it. That's not the same as usurping the Constitution because we failed to enforce it, or we failed to really understand its purpose and why it is the way that it is, and why it says what it says, and why it doesn't say what it doesn't say. That's the problem. The problem isn't that people want to change it. And it's wild because I actually disagree about removing the Second Amendment. That's a horrific thing. But I will give Hasan credit. He wants to remove it through the process that was designed by our founders. That's what he wants to do. He actually, and it's weird. He said, I'm from, my parents are from India. I'm from England. I'm a naturalized citizen. He appreciates the Constitution more than the people he's arguing with, even though he wants to pull out parts of it that I think are absolutely vital. So it's weird. It's a weird situation to have to say Hasan seems to value the Constitution more than these guys.
You have agreed. You have agreed the
I'm
Constitution.
not the one saying you just get rid of them willy-nilly.
All
I
right,
don't
now
agree.
We're ramping up. We're
I
ramping up.
don't
I'm changing
agree that Joe Biden should come in and say
Okay.
by executive order,
Yes.
if Joe Biden put out executive order saying Second Amendment no longer applies, I can round up everyone's guns. I don't agree with that.
You're resort-
Just think about that. Think about it. That's crazy. The man wants the Second Amendment gone, but is willing to say, no, my team must do it the right way. Okay. I agree with the must do it the right way. I don't agree with doing it, but I agree that he is correct on the process for having it done. And he said, if Joe Biden had just made an executive order, he would be wrong. Now, perhaps in some other context, he might be not as willing to hold his team accountable. I don't know. But in this one, he is. He is saying, my team that might want to remove it, you have a limit on how you can do it. You have to do it the right way. It's crazy.
is exactly
I don't
the
agree
same.
with them. No, but I don't agree with the method of
don't-
doing it. It's
yes,
unconstitutional.
that's fine.
He would have been defying the
That's fine,
Constitution,
but-
and I would have said so, but you can't bring yourself to say so. We've been sitting here for several minutes. All of your friends have seen me ask you several times, do you agree that Donald Trump is defying the First, Fourth, Fifth, 14th, and possibly 22nd Amendments.
And nobody really gave him an answer. More importantly, I think it was like 40 minutes in or something. I don't have the clip of it, but I think there was a girl. She was like, okay, let's talk about, I think she said the first and the fourth, I think was the ones that she picked. She said, why? Why do you believe that Donald Trump has violated those amendments? Good. That's the right way to approach this. Because how are you going to debate somebody if you don't know why they believe what they believe? I mean, he listed all of them. He's like, he was ready. He's like, first, I think he said fourth, fifth. Did he say the seventh? And then 22nd? I can't remember all of them. But he said like 4 or 5 of them, 5 or 6 of them, right? So the natural, proper way, if we had a generation of young people that understood how to have a conversation, would be to say, okay, let me pick 1 or 2. Why? Why do you believe that? Okay. What do you mean by this? Okay. What is the evidence that you have to support this conclusion? Okay. Let's talk about that evidence. Okay. Let's talk about your underlying principle. But none of them really did that. I mean, the one girl did come up and she did ask. She didn't dive in as much as I would have wanted to. And so this represents a bit of a failure on our part. We have, look, 47. You fellow olds out there with me, we got to do better. We really need to work on our young generation because they're going to destroy the country out of ignorance, right? And I don't mean to be rude to any of these kids. I get it. They're young. They're impressionable. You know, they're just getting out in the world. They don't know a lot of things. I totally get that. But they also can vote, right? They can donate to campaigns. You know, they can convince other people that their ideas are good. So then you have more people that can vote on bad ideas or bad premises. Right? This is not good. All right, let me hit some comments here real quick. We'll go to intermission, and then we will come back and we will talk about this Connor guy. I know, John, right? What planet am I living on? Losing faith with this generation. Me too, man. Me too. It's kind of scary. Let's see. It's those nut jobs from Moms Demand Action. They're chipping away at the Second Amendment. They know they have a faction, Students Demand Action. Yeah, they do. And you know what? If you support the Second Amendment, we need some, I don't know, maybe we need like dads demand more guns or something like that. I don't know. And then we can branch off and be like, you know, students demand more guns. I don't know, something like that, you know, or maybe we need to start more basic, like dads demand less ignorance. You know, dads demand better constitutional understanding. And you don't have to be a constitutional whiz. I'm not, but I think I have a firm foundation and understanding that I could sit there and have a conversation with Hasan and I could hold my own. Like, I think I understand it well enough. And I'm not an expert. I'm not a scholar of any kind. I read it. I understand it. I go back and I say, you know, I apply it to the time of the day that it was written. Say, what did they do? What did they believe? What did they write about? How were they writing about it elsewhere, you know, in non-government documents? You know, what did they say in letters to each other? Like, I could do all that. And so can our young people. They should. So it's disheartening. Yes. John says, if you have no foundational principles, you will automatically lose the debate. You will. And there's that other saying, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. But I think in order for that to be of value, you do need to have some foundational principles for which you can stand on consistently. Let's see. I like it. Men demand defense. Like it. I think John came. Weren't you? I think you were the one that said something earlier this morning, and I really liked it. I like it. I love this audience. This is great. All right. I might have to steal that. Okay. We don't believe in intellectual property around here. I'm just saying. No. But I appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to go to intermission. We'll come back. We'll talk about this kid. And I know we're going long tonight, and that's okay. So we may have another 30, 40 minutes. Hope you stay with me. We'll be back.
The day
Hey, Liberty
I
fam,
got
do me a
cited,
favor.
I
If you
was
enjoyed the show,
blindsided.
be sure
I
to hit
couldn't
the like
believe
and
that I was
subscribe
in
button to my
America.
channel. Hold on. Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe. All right, we're going to start this over. Let's see if we can do this right.
The day I got cited, I was blindsided.
I couldn't believe that I was in America. I left a place where that stuff happens, but not here. Here, this is the land of opportunity.
I didn't do anything wrong.
I just couldn't believe it. I didn't do anything wrong.
You think that you're doing things the right way. You think that you're a law-abiding citizen.
And they said I was under arrest for braiding hair, and they took me to jail.
They seized a little over $100,000 out of the my business account here. Took 13 years to get it, and less than 13 seconds, I guess, to take it away.
I remember my attorneys telling me, most people don't win against the government.
Because I know now that we have more than just a chance. I know that we're going to keep our homes.
If we win here at the U.S. Supreme Court, it makes a difference for my girls and for so many other families.
I'm fighting back because I don't want to have a lot of other people have to go through the same thing I'm going through with their property getting seized.
We changed the law so that everybody else can be treated fairly.
I want the opportunity
to operate my legal business,
to practice my craft,
to meet the needs of my community in an innovative way.
And someone has to stand up.
Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, so I saw that I got an email, and apparently if you're watching on YouTube, there may have been a disruption because it was like, hey, you got a copyright strike. So I'm going to have to reach out to YouTube and be like, here's what it said. It said, due to a copyright match, your stream was interrupted. Evening edition fired for beliefs. Streams are interrupted when copyright content is detected. After copyright material is no longer being streamed, streams are automatically re-enabled. So if you're watching on YouTube, and I think you can chime in there, I believe that Liberty Lady is, John is, and so you can let me know if you missed something or how I didn't see anything in the comments suggest or saying otherwise. So I don't know. I'm not sure why. I don't know. But that's what I said. So given that, because this next clip is like 7 minutes long, because we're going to play all of Connor's and we're going to just listen to him. I might not even interrupt too much. I'm going to try. I'll try. I can't promise anything. So I have went ahead and I will, I have it blurred. So let's see here. Yeah, we got it blurred. So we're going to blur the next one. So sorry, you're not going to be able to see it, but you will be able to hear it. Hopefully that will keep us from having any further trouble with YouTube. And I did want to get to a comment here. So Prince Parn said, and this is on X. I forgot to look at it earlier, so I apologize. Questions: and what would be the motivation for an illegal to vote? You risk getting caught and have, a really low chance of being the deciding vote. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but I can make a guess. I'll tell you a quick story, very quick. So I used to mentor a kid, and he was telling me about one of his past mentors who was heavy Republican, and he tried to pay his mother to vote for Mitt Romney. So if you're asking me, if you're like, okay, what might be a reason that an illegal immigrant might try to vote, is if there's a way for them to get in and vote and game the system, use a fake social security number, use somebody else's, whatever, some way like that, and somebody were to pay them, I could foresee that. But I agree that I'm not so confident that they would be willing to risk getting caught and deported in that particular case, because like, what is the value add to them? The risk or the reward has to be greater than the risk. And so if you came here and you're trying to stay here, my experience has been that you're probably going to stay under the radar. When I say my experience, when I was in my 20s, I lived in Richmond, Indiana, and I worked for Rent-A-Center, and Mexicans, I don't know if they were actually Mexican, but we thought they were. But Mexicans were some of our best paying customers. And the reason I felt is probably because they were illegal and trying to stay under the radar. Now, why did I make that assessment? One day I was going through my little route to call people and say, hey, don't forget to come and make your payment. And I called a number, and a Hispanic person answered and I said, yeah, please let them know that their payment is due today. Please come in. Okay, thank you. And then I get down a few names later, and I call a number, and I was like, well, that number looks familiar, but like, whatever. So I call it, and a person answers. And then I was like, yeah, same spiel. They said, okay, we'll send them in. And then the third person, I was like, I know I've seen that number. So I go back and I look, and I'm like, I'm calling the same house multiple times. So I really did this. This is a true story. I called them and I said, can you just tell everybody to come in today and make their payment? And they were like, yes. And they did. So I think that most illegal immigrants would do what they can to stay under the radar, because at the end of the day, unless they're getting amnesty, there's not really a lot of benefit to them. And so I think the crowd that says, oh, they're voting, you need to show like not only the numbers of people that are voting, but what is their incentive? And I would especially hold my libertarian peers accountable for this, because my libertarian peers, they are supposed to believe that people operate on the basis of incentive. Incentives matter. Like stop reading all these economic and libertarian books in theory and then not coming out and saying what the incentive is. So from now on, I'm glad you kind of brought this to my mind and I'm having this conversation, because from now on, I'm going to be, when the next time one of my libertarian peers says, oh, these people are voting, these illegals are voting, I'm going to be like, what's the incentive? And then, and if they don't have one, I'm going to be like, so you're telling me you're a libertarian, you've read all this libertarian literature that I haven't read, and you believe in human action and you believe in incentives, and you're going to make an argument that doesn't even have one. No, I'm not buying it. So I don't know. I don't think there is. I haven't heard one. I can't think of one. Doesn't mean there isn't. That just means I don't know. But my best guess is there isn't one. And they're probably not voting nearly as much as we think they are. Are some of them? Perhaps. I mean, there's like some 350 million roughly people, somewhere around there in this country. Somebody's probably voting that shouldn't be, for whatever reason. And people do things for dumb reasons. Right. So I'm not going to say that nobody's doing it. But again, I'm going to be skeptical that they're doing it in such numbers that it's really a problem. I think you would probably be more likely to find fake ballots being sent in from some other country, or something like that. Somebody who has a low risk and they could, maybe send in a ballot, a fake ballot, and hope it gets through. And if it doesn't get through, no harm, no foul. They don't get caught. They don't get busted. All right, let's play this next clip again. This is the last clip, and then this is going to be Connor. This is the guy that was that supposedly was fired.
Nice
It's
to
a
meet
pleasure
you.
to meet you, sir.
Mehdi, lovely to meet you.
So I would say that with Trump being anti-constitution, I don't really care, to be quite frankly, because in regards to the Constitution is a document that should seek to serve us. And when it fails to seek to serve us, that can be amended. Laws can be changed. And quite frankly, the fact is we're defending things in this country that shouldn't be defended. The First Amendment should not defend pornography and making children and women be victimized.
Okay. This is tough. This is a really tough one. Because, and I'm trying to, I'm typing right now so that I can bring up this quote. It's from H.L. Mencken. It goes, "The trouble with fighting for human freedom is that one spends most of one's time defending scoundrels. For it is against scoundrels that oppressive laws are first aimed, and oppression must be stopped at the beginning if it is to be stopped at all." So in defending free speech, yes, we're going to start with defending people you may not like, which might be pornographers, or it might be people that say very vile things. That's the nature of it. We don't, it's, you could also argue the first they came for this person, then they came for this person. And by the time they got to me, there was no one left to defend me. It's the same concept, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, people like all these people clapping in their mind, they have this vision of freedom of speech has this small container of things that I like, that they like. Okay. And they're like, that's what the First Amendment is for. It's not for other things that I dislike. But once we get away from those, like in this world that they envision, where we stop defending pornography and other things that they don't like, well, then what do we go after next? Well, that's the problem. And there is plenty of history to show. And here, I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to do something really quickly just to help keep us, hopefully keep us out of trouble. Maybe if I make me a little bit bigger on the screen, we won't have this problem. Because maybe the video scan won't notice it. But the problem is that once you run out of things, our system has shown that we look for the next thing. And that next thing could be the thing that you value, the speech that you value. And there are plenty of leftists out there, because these are right-wingers. There are plenty of leftists who have their own vision of what's not acceptable. So they will say like, oh, you told a Jew joke, you should go right to jail. Don't pass go, don't collect $200, right to jail, right? They have their views as well. Do you want to empower your enemies to come after you later? I don't. So yes, I'm willing to tolerate free speech in things that I hate or dislike. I don't really hate too many things, but things that I dislike, and there are plenty of things where I say, yeah, you have the freedom to say that. You really shouldn't. Right? So these kids, I don't know.
Women and children be victimized as a result of that. I think things like blasphemy shouldn't be allowed per the First Amendment. I think that, quite frankly, there are a lot of legal processes that are enabling criminals and bad people to fully enact their will in this country in the name of the Constitution or following the Constitution. So, quite frankly, if Trump is anti-Constitution, good. And I think he should go further.
So,
wow. Further? Oh, he will. I promise you he will. And then the next guy or gal, they will too, whether they're on your team or not. This is one of those situations where be careful what you ask for. Let's continue.
This is wonderfully revealing of the modern conservative mindset. So I appreciate you spelling it out. So
okay, so let's stop there real quick. I don't think this is the modern conservative mindset. I think what we're seeing here is, I think they're a very small subset. I hope so. Like these ones are particularly bad. Some of these arguments I've never heard people make. So I'm like, wow.
Just checking. Do you support the Second Amendment?
I do.
Okay. Surprise. I was shocked to hear that.
What if somebody said, you know what? Kamala Harris wants to take away your, this gun or that gun. She should go further. I mean, he just made the argument for him. His argument is no different than the mom's demand that we were just talking about a moment ago, where they're like, oh, all these children are dying. We should do something about it. We should get rid of all of our guns. This guy literally just made the same argument that mom's demand made. It's the same principles apply. Everything is the same. It's just a different application. That's it. But fundamentally, it is the same.
I'm saying that Donald Trump is defying the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the 14th Amendment. He's thinking of defying the 12th and 22nd Amendments. You're saying you don't care about the Constitution, but actually you do because you quite like the Second Amendment. You just don't like the bits that you disagree with. Can I just be clear on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm more than willing to amend it and include
whenever
the
it's in
Second
your
Amendment.
favor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can Democrats do the same when they're in office?
No, absolutely not.
So
Because
you don't
it's the
believe in
friend enemy.
democracy?
No, I don't. Absolutely not.
What do you believe in?
Autocracy.
By who?
Honestly, quite frankly, anyone who is in line with Catholic teaching.
Now, this is hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. He's like, anybody in line with Catholic teaching. About 2 weeks ago, I went to an event. It was not a political event, but whenever I go to an event, especially with my wife, she's always like, oh, my husband's got a podcast. He loves talking about politics. Ask him about everything. And so I ended up talking to a guy who came here from Cuba. I think it was Cuba. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Cuba. And he was older than me. He might have been early 60s, something like that. He came here from Cuba, and he came as a child by himself through the church, the Catholic Church. They had set up some sort of system. I'd never heard of this, but that apparently down in the Miami area, I think it was Miami, he said there was like this area where all these families would live, and they would bring these kids. The Catholic Church from Cuba and potentially other countries would send them over to live in these little communities. As it was almost like if you would imagine a community orphanage in a sense. So you're not living with your parents. You're probably not living with any siblings, and you're there and you're getting, and everybody's Catholic, right? They're all working through the Catholic Church. So it's kind of interesting that he's like, oh, I want Catholics, because I don't know that he understands the history of Catholicism and how some of what the church has actually done over the years does not fit his beliefs. And that's the case for all these people. They seem to, like, if you go back or you look at the world around them more broadly, it seems like they're not familiar. It's like they've got this very narrow view of something, and they ignore that others who have maybe a similar view actually have a broader view, or they apply it differently. So it's very, very interesting.
Donald Trump is not Catholic.
Of course, he's not. I completely agree, and
So
that's
you
part of
support
the problem.
Trump? You don't support Trump?
No, I don't. I didn't even vote for him. I wrote in like John Pork or someone. I
Why
can't
did
even
you-
remember.
Why did you vote if you don't believe in democracy and you want autocracy?
Well, because quite frankly, I voted.
This is
I kind
fascinating.
of voted just to.
I came with this
troll a
argument,
little
but
bit,
I'm bored of my own argument. I'm much more interested in this. So
yeah, absolutely.
How do we get to an autocracy?
I think, quite frankly, that if we are able to enact local
Who
leaders,
is the we, by the way?
I think, quite frankly, these far right conservatives sitting right around
White
me.
people?
Yeah,
No brown
absolutely.
people. So,
Well,
some
actually,
of you guys,
I have quite.
some of the people
I
in this
have
room
quite-
don't make the cut
No,
from what I can
actually-
see visually.
actually-
And so it's funny because if you watch the whole video, there are people who, like one guy was from Iran. He was talking about, the process for him to come over from Iran. There was another guy, I think he was Hispanic, so it's interesting that he's like, yeah, white people. And then like everybody's clapping. And I'm like half of you aren't white. This is crazy. This is probably the most wild Jubilee. I don't watch a lot of Jubilee videos, so maybe there's a one that's more crazy. This is one of the more wild ones. And I watched the one with Destiny. Okay. And I don't like Destiny. Like if there's one commentator that I dislike, Destiny, like if I had to name one, just one, I'd probably name him. I really dislike that guy. And I watched his, and even that one wasn't as crazy as this. And that's saying something.
Hold on for a moment. I do think that there are people who happen to not be white who do actually have history in this country and have roots in this country. For instance, from the Mexican-American War, we subsumed a lot of territory of people who have far stakes in this country who happen to be Hispanic or what have you.
Okay.
I'm for defending the traditional demographics of this country, which is majority white, and should stay that
How
way.
does the United States...
That's crazy. Now, and I'm not saying that because I'm Native American and I've got like this nice, olive colored skin. I don't care. I was born and raised here. I served in the military. Good luck with this guy getting me out. It ain't happening. But it's just wild And then he's like, I got fired. Like we're 2 minutes and 40 seconds into his 4 minute and 30 second, we're almost halfway through his little portion. And I'm like, I can see why you got fired. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
States. I mean, we've gone so off topic, but how does the United States look like under you? Sorry, what's your name?
My name is my name's Connor. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Took a little bit of a doubt there.
Oh, well, I use a pseudonym online.
Fair enough.
But fair enough.
How would Connor's America look? What would it look like?
Well, quite frankly, I think we would.
Okay, look. I know that I have some of my filler words. I think I say right a lot, and I've been working on it. But dude, you got to work on that, quite frankly. Like everything can't be quite frankly. Okay, that's just driving me crazy.
Support people who shouldn't be here.
I didn't ask about deporting. What does the government look like?
What does the government look like?
Yeah.
I would say, quite frankly, it's under a sort of benevolent leader, such as
Where does he
Franco.
come from?
It could be a kind of aristocratic class. Could be someone
who picks the autocrat?
Frankly, the people. I mean, we could hold a vote on it. Kings were
isn't that democracy?
Well, sure. You can have a vote to get to that stage.
And then no more votes afterwards.
Absolutely.
That is the craziest idea ever. We're going to vote to get to a place where we can't vote anymore. That's insane. This dude is crazy. It's crazy. I mean, look, I will support his right to have these dumb, idiotic ideas all day, every day. I will also support my right to make fun of him.
100%.
Wow. And if that autocrat kills you and your family, you're fine with that?
Well, I'm not going to be a part of the group that he kills, because that's the whole thing.
See, he's a commie in a sense. Because when you talk to communists, they're like, oh, or sometimes socialists, but those people that identify as one of those two, they have this vision of the world where, hey, we redistribute wealth and everybody has all the things that they need to meet their needs, and they have a job. Maybe they don't have to work too much. We get rid of maybe the 40-hour work week, and we only have to work, 32 hours a week, 24 hours a week. And the rest of the time we get to learn to paint and we get to learn to program and, do all this fun stuff. And I think in both cases, people have this weird vision that anything negative won't be for them. And I don't understand it. I don't know where they're getting this idea. Oh, that won't apply to me. Anything bad will apply to other people. They're not going to come and kill me. They're not going to make me work in the salt mines. I'm going to be able to do all these other things. And it's like, what is underlying this view that you're going to have it so well, that you're going to have it so good? What is underlying this view? I don't understand it. But as far as I'm concerned, this dude basically has the same logic as your typical retarded commie. I mean, he does. I mean, he thinks life is going to be grand. And in this particular case, despite evidence to the contrary, we have seen what happens with these benevolent dictators. No such thing. They don't happen. Like, you could put me as a benevolent dictator, and it's possible that some of y'all would piss me off and I would abuse my power. It's totally possible, right? Were there kings that maybe were good kings? Yes. But were there things where they weren't so good and people that maybe had things happen to them that they didn't want? Yes. Even from good kings, bad things happened, right? Because people are human at a minimum. At a bare minimum, people are human. And then you just may not realize that you don't fit their goal. So you've brought somebody in to be an autocrat and then not realize that later their vision was not the same as yours.
How do you know?
Autocrats
tend to kill everyone, even their own
Schmitt makes
supporters.
this point very well in his work. It's the friend-enemy distinction, right?
Carl
liberals,
Schmitt, the Nazi theoretician.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't care.
Are you a fan of the Nazis?
I frankly don't care being called a Nazi
I
at
didn't
all.
say that. I
Doesn't
didn't
matter
actually
to
say
me.
that. I said, are you a fan of the Nazis?
Somebody clapped. Did you hear that? Somebody clapped. He's like, I don't care okay, yes, I don't care what you call me, but I'm not going to be like, hey, if you call me a Nazi, that's cool, whatevs. I'm going to be like, well, for starters, one, yeah, I don't care that you call me a Nazi because I'm not a Nazi. That would be my response. Not like, I don't care, whatever. And also, by the way, I'm going to support this known Nazi and their ideas. Wow.
Well, they persecuted the church a little bit. I'm not a fan of that. But
what about the persecution of the Jews?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't support anyone's human dignity being assaulted. I'm a Catholic.
But you don't condemn Nazi persecution of the Jews?
I think that there was a little bit of persecution and stuff like that.
Okay, so that answer is no. Let's just be honest. I mean, this dude want to know why he got fired? It's because his answer was basically no. There are some things for which it should be an automatic yes or no, end of story. And then if you say anything else, people are going to default to whatever the bad answer is. You know? And I told you about this the other day in one of my shows. I said, look, when you're giving somebody an answer, you're better off starting with yes or no and then saying, now let me tell you why. Okay? Because if the question is, do you support Nazis? And you're like, well, okay, so the answer is going to be yes in people's minds. So you for a question like that, you lead with, no, I do not. Now let me qualify that, right? You don't qualify it first. You qualify it after you've given a very clear, undeniable answer if there needs to be some nuance. And especially for a question like this. It's wild.
Rename the show because you're a little bit more than a far-right Republican.
Hey, what can I say?
I think you can say, I'm a fascist.
Yeah, I am. Absolutely.
I'm just checking who's clapping just to get my set of where everyone is on this. Because you know that millions of people are going to be watching you on YouTube and checking out who the fascists and the Nazis are.
I'm not ashamed of that whatsoever.
No, clearly you're not.
During the
That is wild. Dude gets up here and he's asked his name and he's like, it's Connor. He's like, well, you don't seem too sure about that. And he's like, I go by a pseudonym. But here's my face for the world to see. By the way, I'm a fascist. Nobody supports fascist. Now, some people might support things that are fascism, thinking that it's something else. That is stupidity or ignorance. But I have never in 47 years heard somebody say proudly, I am a fascist. Never heard that once. And if anybody clips that with me saying it, I'm going to get you.
War period prior to World War II, it was only those parties that properly enacted the people's will. That's why they won. The conservatives were fat cats. They were aristocrats.
Are you in favor of killing people who aren't like you?
Quite frankly, I'm not.
You mentioned Franco earlier. Franco killed a lot of innocent people.
Oh, well, he killed communists. He killed people who raped nuns and killed priests.
What about children who he killed and women who he killed?
What are you talking about? He never killed any women or children. He was Catholic,
He only killed combatants. Is that what you're claiming?
Yeah, he only killed combatants.
Never killed any.
Okay, so I am going to, I want to see what they put up on the screen. We're going to take the blur off for just a second. We're going to see what he said or what they said. So give me just a second. Let me undo the blur here. Fact check. Franco and his forces killed or executed 150,000 people. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't even need to know who they are. 150,000 people. I don't care that they're communist, right? Because there's nothing about 150,000, unless you said we went to war and 150,000 people died that were combatants. Any other answer, and in that case, more than likely, I'm still going to disagree. But that's going to be the only case where I might say, okay, I kind of understand it. But in any other context, absolutely not. 150,000 people is awful. That includes members of the Catholic Church clergy who were deemed either liberal or loyal to the Spanish Republic. Okay? So this dude, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. And I got some thoughts on this.
The white terror was only punishing those people who did acts of terrorism. And again, are you supporting like raping innocent women? Nuns, dude. Killing priests? I mean, priests don't brandish guns and kill people.
You just refuse to condemn the Nazi Holocaust, my friend. I don't think you're in a position to ask anyone any questions.
I quite frankly don't care what you think about me. If I'm a Nazi and being a Nazi
is mutual,
and being a Nazi means upholding human dignity, because I even believe in your dignity. I don't in a state that I was running, I wouldn't want to hurt you or anything like that. But
I don't think he knows what a Nazi is. He's like, if Nazi means upholding dignity, it doesn't. Connor, it doesn't mean it in any way, shape, or form. Under no circumstances. Absolutely zero. That's the three, but like zero. Let me see if I can get it right. There we go. Zero circumstances does Nazi mean upholding dignity. And just to go back when he was asked about the Jews, that's another situation where, hey, do you support or do you think it was okay or whatever, however the question was phrased, that, the Nazi killed all the Jews? No, it's terrible. It was awful, disgusting, vile. That's your answer. That is the only answer. I can't, I'm not surprised he got fired. I'm really not.
Quite frankly,
I don't debate fascists.
okay. So do you concede then? I mean, why
Do I concede you're a fascist who won't condemn the Nazis?
Yeah.
Yes, I concede that.
Okay, great. So I mean, what are we doing here? Because I mean, you
don't
just seem
know
offended.
what you're doing here,
You
to be
just seem
honest.
offended, to be quite frankly. Like,
I'm offended by people who can't condemn the Nazis. Yes, I am.
okay. Well, I condemn the evils that they did, but I don't really
Against
care
the
about
Jews?
being. Yeah, sure. I don't care about being called a
Yeah,
Nazi.
sure.
Is the whole thing.
I never called you a
I
Nazi.
care
You
about
called
doing
yourself
the right
a Nazi,
thing.
a fascist, and a General Franco
Well,
supporter.
yeah, I am a General Franco supporter. He was awesome. He was so super cool, quite frankly.
Nobody that slaughters 150,000 people is awesome. No way, not no how, never, ever, ever, ever. This dude is a maniac, or I'm not even sure if that's a good word. Like, I'm drawing a blank on the right word for this guy. Like, was he forcefully thrown on his head? I don't know. This is bizarre.
Because the whole
And
thing,
you don't believe in democracy.
I don't believe in
What are
democracy.
you doing here at a televised debate?
Because-
This is democracy. Don't want to debate and
Because
disagree.
it is the means to support an end. The reason we have free speech now is because we want to be openly talking about our opinions so we can get the state that we want. But it doesn't mean
This is
upholding
great.
free speech after we win. Again, I
the
mentioned
only good thing about this fascist moment
the
we're in
whole
is
reason
that you guys are so open about it.
The
It's
whole
great.
reason
Say
I
the
mentioned
quiet part loud.
the
Keep saying
whole
it.
reason I mentioned Carl Schmitt earlier, and you kind of blew past him, is the friend-enemy distinction.
Past him because of the Nazi
Even liberals, when they take power, they want to enact policies and they want to enact protections for their people and their ideas, and they're willing to punish their enemy. And so I'm the same way. I'm like, hey, if you're going to punish me, I'm going to get in power, and I'm going to frankly punish you when you try to leverage power against me. Just that simple.
Okay. Whew. That was. Are y'all okay out there? If you want to jump in the chat and just be like, DL, after listening to that, I am not okay. I will totally understand. You have my full sympathy with that, because wow, that's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about him potentially getting fired. Now, I haven't seen any reports that really confirm it. Apparently, he does have a give, send, go. I'm not going to put it up on the screen because I simply don't want to support him. And he just said, hey, I got fired for my legal speech. Okay, here's the first thing that you guys need to understand, you young people. Us olds, I think we generally understand it. But you young people, you need to understand. Number one, people like me will support your right to speech, to engage in free speech and say the most horrendous things all day, every day. Okay? I do draw the line at threats. You make a threat to somebody, like a credible threat, like a real threat. Not if you just like, I wish you were dead. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you make a credible threat, then no, that does not fall under free speech. Outside of that, I'm pretty absolute. Okay? You can say whatever you want. However, you might have to deal with the consequences of it. And that's something I think a lot of people misunderstand. And now, he said it was because of cancel culture. I told you earlier, I don't believe that cancel culture is simply your job finding out because you went viral that you said some vile things and they said, we don't want to be associated with you anymore. So the comment that I made was something like, I said, I don't think this is cancel culture. I think this is simply a case of freedom of speech meets freedom of association. So if I own a business, I can decide that I want, and in my view, like right now, I can decide that I want to work with a lot. There's a lot of flexibility. It's not as much as I would want, because as a libertarian, I would say you should be able to hire and fire somebody for any reason that you want. Okay. And we can have a conversation about that some other day and about how the market would balance that out, so on and so forth. So it's not just because people want to be like, oh, so you support, firing people because they're a woman or something like that, which I would be like, well, if I want to fire somebody because they're a woman or because they're black, then I probably wouldn't have hired them in the first place. But I believe the market, if you had a proper free market, would balance things out, and it would force people to behave reasonably, right? Like they wouldn't just get away with being abusive to people. Okay. But that there is consequences. There are consequences for the things that you say. So if my company were to tune in and see my podcast and say, yeah, we disagree with you, dude. Yeah, maybe you weren't saying anything too crazy like this dude was, but we don't want you on our team. They are in the right to let me go. the same way that his company was in the right to let him go. And it is not cancel culture. What would cancel culture be? Well, it would be like if a bunch of people saw his video and said, I hate this guy, I want to get him fired, and they did their sleuthing and they found out where he worked and they made a bunch of calls to his company that they didn't know about and weren't even doing any business with. And they said, you got to fire this dude. Well, what ends up happening is a lot of companies, it's just easier. It's better business for them to let somebody go than to try to weather the storm, especially if they're a smaller company. Okay. So in that particular case, I would say, yes, that would be cancel culture because you have a bunch of people basically ganging up to get rid of you. And more importantly, they don't necessarily have a vested interest in the company that you work for. Okay. And I mean a real vested interest. Now, if one of your one of your coworkers saw you and they were disgusted, and then they said, they said, hey, boss, you got to see what Connor said. Look at this video. Watch this 4 minutes. Your mind's going to be blown, right? Dude said he was like, okay with being called a Nazi. Like, we got to let this guy go. Well, then the boss can go and talk with HR and they can work it out and say, okay, you know what? We actually don't want this person working for us. Or they could say, Connor, you need to never, ever again appear on TV, ever. And if you do, we're going to fire you. If this blows up and our company takes heat, we're going to fire you. This is your one warning, right? They can do any one of those things. And that would be legitimate, right? Because the person that's working there that has to work with you 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, possibly longer, they have a vested interest in who they're working for. They can go to their boss and say, I don't feel comfortable working with somebody who openly describes himself as a fascist, as, you know, and welcomes the Nazi label and even idolizes Nazis, or at least one or two of them, right? Like that's legitimate. So I don't think it was cancel culture. Here's the other reason. Let's bring this back to libertarianism. In the libertarian view, you do not own your reputation. However, you are not powerless to influence it. So people, what episode am I on? This is, well, let's see here. Let me take a look here. So my last episode was 552. I'm not numbering the ones at night. So I'm at 550 episodes. Okay. If somebody watched all of those episodes and they formulated an opinion about me, that's their opinion. I have no control over that. I have no right to their perception about me, right or wrong. They could watch it, misinterpret everything I say, and be like, this dude's a terrible guy, right? Okay. I have no right at all, but I can influence it. How do you influence it? By the way you talk. It should be pretty obvious that the last thing you want to do is laugh and joke about being associated with Nazis. Because when you do, people will formulate an opinion about you. Now, maybe this guy's a super duper nice guy in reality. Maybe he's just got some batshit crazy ideas. But at the end of the day, he's a nice guy. Maybe he would, help you change your tire if he saw you stranded on the road. It's very, very possible. I don't know. I don't know this guy. But what we can say is that in 4.5 minutes, I have decided I probably don't want to know this guy because he sounds crazy. He sounds like somebody that I would just bang my head against the wall after talking to. Like that, and that's my opinion of him that I get to have, and he can't do anything about other than try to influence it. And he's already screwed that up. And he screwed it up for everybody that's watched this clip because he does not own his reputation. But he was not powerless in promoting that reputation or giving people the idea. Because we all watched it and we were like, that dude is nuts. Right? That's what happened. So from a libertarian standpoint, like this could happen. This very thing that played out could absolutely happen in a libertarian society. And I want to make this very clear to people because I think a lot of people misunderstand what it means to be a libertarian. What does it mean to be a free speech absolutist, but also at the same time say, I really love the free market and the free market can be brutal. And in this particular case, the free market was brutal. They fired him. Right. And again, I don't know if he's a nice guy or not. I'm assuming, I'm being charitable, I'm assuming he might be a nice guy in real life, right? That he just came to debate and he's got some batshit crazy ideas. Or maybe he was trying to be controversial. Maybe he got stupid and he's been, maybe he's been a troll online so much that he learned, that he basically ended up carrying that with him into the real world. In that case, go touch grass, bro. Really, go touch grass. A lot of it. You might want to lay in it for a while. Just take a nap. I don't know. You need something. Okay. So I don't know, but I'm being charitable and saying like maybe he's a nice guy. Okay. And at the end of the day, being a nice guy didn't save him, presumably. Okay. Because again, I don't know that he's a nice guy. I don't know that he actually got fired. I don't even know if that's really his give, send, go. I'm making an assumption that all these things are the case. Okay. Some of them, there's a little bit more evidence than others. Okay. But that's the point. This is kind of the point that I want to leave you with is that, yeah, you have a reputation. People are going to think things about you. You don't have control over it, but you can influence it. And the way that you influence it is how you engage with people, the things that you say, right? The way that you communicate. So again, if I was to give somebody advice, I would say one of the things that you can do to make people not misinterpret what you're saying is to make very clear responses when somebody asks you something. And no, you have to know. Don't lie. Don't do that. If somebody asks you if you support Nazis or you think Nazis were good guys and you believe they were good guys, you might as well just fess up. Don't lie about it. We'll find out. And then we're going to think you're a liar on top of it. So that's just going to go worse for you. But if you think that Nazis were bad people, do not hem and haw about it. That is not a question that you can hem and haw about. You answer. You can hem and haw when somebody says, "What's your name?" and you're like, "I want to keep my privacy." Okay. If you're caught off guard and you're trying to figure out like how to identify myself, I almost said my name was Richard, but I'm really going by Connor. Fine. That's where you can hem and haw because he did, and we saw it. He hemmed and hawed, and then Hasan was like, "Dude, what's up? Why you seem a little bit unsure?" And he's like, "Well, I'm just a pseudonym, and I want to keep my privacy." Okay, great. And then he accepted it, and then they moved on, right? So you have to learn to read the room. The room was acceptable that you could use a fake name. And for many of the participants, the room was acceptable for him being a crazy Nazi supporter. But the room outside was not so supportive. I'm not, and millions of other people that watch that clip are not either. Okay? And so he did it to himself. This was all preventable. He has nobody to blame but himself. Plain and simple, 100%. And it's going to be hard to come back from that because we've all seen it. And so now now he might get lucky in that his real name is not known, at least so far. And so if a future employer Googles his name, they may not connect him with this show. But if they've seen the show, well, now they'll be able to connect his face. And they'll be like, nope, don't want that guy working here. And even if you say, well, it's not fair or not legal to, deny me an application, deny me employment because of my political beliefs. Look, bud, I just want to tell you something. I don't know if you know this or not, but employers have ways of not hiring you. Just saying. They can find a reason. So he screwed up royally. And at the end of the day, the only thing that you can do is be mindful of how you communicate. And and it's not hard. Like I tell people, go to Toastmasters, but sometimes just watch some shows that tell you, here are the things that you don't say, and maybe pay attention. If everybody in the world, except for actual Nazis, but if everybody else hates and despises Nazis and it's got a really terrible view, you should never, ever want to be associated with the Nazi. Now, do I care if people call me a Nazi? Not particularly. But if I'm engaging one-on-one with somebody, I do. I'm going to be like, hold up. We can't go any further if you think what Hasan did where he's like, you're a fascist. I don't want to talk to you anymore. It's basically what he did. He basically shut down the conversation. I would do that if someone thought I was a Nazi. I would be like, whoa, we can't have this conversation anymore. We're done. Like if you're going to believe that, we're done. And if I screwed up and gave them that impression, then I got to deal with that. So this is how you keep yourself out of trouble, or at least do, in that direction. I mean, again, an employer can always fire you if they see something that they don't like on social media. They can decide they want to part ways. Freedom of association. I totally believe that, but you can hedge your bets a little bit just in the way that you communicate. All right, folks, that's my show. DL, after listening to that, I'm not okay. The YouTube is giving you a strike over this Jubilee. Yeah, I'll contest it. Don't worry. And I'll let you guys know in the future what comes of that. Perhaps we'll get beyond it. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to head out for the night. Thank you guys for watching 2-hour show. Hope it wasn't too much on you, but I hope you learned a lot. Hope that you got a lot of value out of this. If you're watching this at a later point, jump in the comments. Let me know. Tell me how I did. Tell me if you disagree with me. Maybe something that I missed, so on and so forth. But I will see you guys tomorrow. I will point out tomorrow's going to be a short show just because I know my morning crew may not be watching tonight, and I have no way to communicate to them. And I was able to find something that I can do on short notice and do a shorter show because I've got an early morning meeting that I have to get to. So I will see you guys tomorrow. But thanks for tuning in.